Hello there, we are your hosts Vivek and Pavitra from the Agile Coach Podcast. In this podcast, we bring fresh perspectives to you through our interviews with thought leaders in Agile coaching, facilitation, business analysis, and product management roles. Enjoy. Today, we have Angela Johnson. We have Angela as a CEO of Collaborative Leadership. She's actually ran the company, been a leader of a company for 14 years. She's also a certified Scrum trainer and a TBR instructor. We're really excited to learn from you, Angela. The first thing we want to kick it off is kind of having you share more about your work and what you've been up to.
Yeah, it's a great question. We kind of started what I call our side hustle. As somebody who offers training classes, we got really tired of going to hotel ballrooms or, you know what I mean? And just the venue not being great. So a few years ago, our team was like, why not do it for ourselves? Why not open our own training and event center? And then we can license space out to other people who need it. So we opened in February 2019, right before the global pandemic, of course. And so pretty tough to have a training and event center when you have to be closed. And so in reopening, we've been pleasantly surprised at the number of people who are coming back to hold their events in person. So the team is really focused on offering our space out to other people right now, in between doing what we do and offering our own classes. So we're having fun seeing people again.
That's amazing. Angela, we're going to talk about some of the content that's in your book, the Scrum Master Files. I actually have started reading the book. The first thing I want to start with is what is the role of a Scrum Master? If you can kind of help paint the picture of what does the role look like? What are the responsibilities for us?
Absolutely. One of the things I try to highlight is the necessary people skills a Scrum Master needs. And so if people think it's going to be an administrative role, that's not true at all. This is more of a guide. So somebody who's offering feedback, making observations. Another stance a Scrum Master will fall into is becoming a neutral objective facilitator to make conversations more productive and, quite frankly, just to help, just to help those conversations.
Yeah.
And then also the stance of teacher. When we talk about who is supposed to be helping the developers, the product owner, and the greater organization with learning this new way of working. Well, that's again another responsibility of the Scrum Master.
Yeah. What would you say are the people skills needed for a Scrum Master role?
And yes, right. I always say people skills, more people skills. So firstly, you got to like working with people, because there honestly are some folks who are like, I don't want to get involved. I don't want to, work with people. I like my programming, or I like my documents, or whatever it is. So they've got to want to do it. They got to like working with people.
Yeah.
Active listening is critical. So actively, neutrally listening, because sometimes there's a lot in what's being said, but more importantly, there might be something to pick up on with what's not being said.
Yeah.
And I know the cameras are tough. I know everybody's tired of being on Zoom all day like we are here and being virtual, but you can pick up on some of those nonverbal cues as well. And I think it's needed more in virtual. So really
100%.
being that neutral, active facilitator, actively listening, and then not shying away from conflict. Because sometimes when, people are just misunderstanding each other, or communication is breaking down, a Scrum Master's got to get in there, sometimes with their black and white stripes and their whistle, almost like they're a referee, but oftentimes it's just to help move things forward.
Yeah. Angela, I'm curious, how do you coach a new Scrum Master? A lot of us, we come from engineering background or consulting background, or come from the background of we need to know things, right? Coming up with the answers. And now somebody wants to go into a Scrum Master role where you're saying that it's active listening, really being curious, looking for what's being said, what's not being said. And then also, asking this question, right? So how do you coach somebody to practice this skill set?
Absolutely. I'll pick up one of my own teammates. When he was newer on the team, he had come from a business analysis discipline. So he had equated his worth, or the way he added value, by typing or by writing. because that's, I
Yeah.
mean, what business analysts typically do. And so to get him paying attention more
Mm,
to the people involved, we had to talk about what to do with his hands. Because he's like, I don't know what to do with my hands. I want to be writing or I want to be typing. So I said, put them in your pockets. Literally told him to put his hands in his pockets so that he wouldn't be tempted to take notes or to pick up a keyboard, because then you're missing those opportunities. And so now when you're focused in, you don't need to know the subject matter to know when something's wrong. For example, if you mentioned engineers or you mentioned, developers, if there's a
mm,
lot of technical mumbo jumbo going
mm.
around and you look at a product owner's face and you see my crinkled eyebrows there,
Yeah. Yeah.
you know that person's confused. You don't need to
Yeah.
know anything about the technical mumbo jumbo to
Yeah.
go, hey, the product owner looks confused. So can you say it to the product owner in plain old words? And if they say, well, if we do it that way, it'll be really slow. I didn't say
Yeah.
slow. The product
Yeah.
owner might say, it's like now you're helping them understand each other. So it
Yeah.
takes tuning into the people part, those reactions, those facial expressions and whatnot, not necessarily all the tech speak or the
Yeah.
subject matter.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm curious how, so for Scrum Masters, so somebody who is not in tech and somebody wants to go become a Scrum Master, they probably are strong in, some people skills, relationship skills, maybe even understand the coaching body of work. When it comes to working in tech, like how much do they need to know? Like how do they need to prepare themselves so that they can be effective in the role?
I always say they don't need to know that
Mm-hmm.
domain. And it's always odd to me when
Mm,
organizations will try to require that domain
mm-hmm.
expertise because they'll say,
Yeah.
well, they'd be better able to help solve impediments. And that's not true because the Scrum Master doesn't take every single impediment. They take the
Yeah.
impediments that the developers can't solve themselves. They
Mm-hmm.
take the impediments that the product owner can't solve themselves. So all
Mm-hmm.
they need to do is to have that acumen for people stuff. And I've got some graduates who have come from somebody who has come from a customer service background who made a
Mm-hmm.
great scrum master at her company. Talk
Mm.
about people skills
Yeah.
and having empathy when things are going wrong and listening and having patience. Oh my gosh, just even
Mm-hmm.
patience. We
Yeah.
have another graduate who had been in the services industry, so bars and restaurants kind of work.
Yeah.
And the place where she worked went out of business during COVID. She's now been a scrum master for over a year
Oh, wow.
by leveraging those people skills. And the company she's serving is actually quite technical. So
Mm.
very capable at that responsibility without having, the technology background.
Yeah. And then I'm curious. So as you're coaching a new Scrum Master and somebody has the people experience working in customer service or in bartending, right? How do you coach them to be more curious and have a growth mindset? If you have come across, I'm pretty sure you have.
Mm-hmm. Question asking, and one of the things we talk about is open-ended questions, or what I guess the industry would call powerful questions.
Mm-hmm.
And for those people listening who might not understand the difference, the
Mm-hmm.
least powerful question can always be answered with a yes or no. Do you
Mm.
want feedback? No.
Yeah.
It's like end of question, right? This is conversation shut down. An
Mm-hmm.
open-ended question would invite a response that the person has to think about. What could you do in the situation to help? What did
Mm-hmm.
you do in the situation to help? Oh, okay. So
Yeah.
that's more reflective now. It requires a more open-ended answer.
Mm-hmm.
So working on those question asking skills, and the more powerful they can be, the better, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
the least powerful questions kind of paint us into a corner.
Yeah. Yeah, I love it. So being neutral, active listening, being curious, open-minded, growth-minded, being able to learn, asking powerful question. So these are essential core skill set of a Scrum Master. My question to you is like help us understand, why are Scrum Masters leaders? Because sometimes people think Scrum Masters are just facilitators or meeting setters, right? Give us your mindset.
Right. I when you said
Yeah.
that, I have this horrible quote from somebody who shall remain nameless, who doesn't really care for the Scrum Master accountability, who said, well, they just order the pizza, right? That's all they
Yeah.
do is order the pizza. It's like, no. And would have to be virtual pizza now with everybody
Yeah.
working, from
Yeah.
home. But the Scrum Master is a true leader who serves, is the way the new
Mm.
guide characterizes it. And so when you
Mm-hmm.
think about a servant leadership mindset, servant leaders don't make it all about themselves. They make it about everybody else. So they
Yeah.
help everybody else. They raise up or improve everybody else around them. Well,
Mm-hmm.
that doesn't have to happen from a position of authority.
Mm-hmm.
Leader doesn't equal authoritarian.
Right.
And so a Scrum Master oftentimes will have to lead by example. They may have to be exhibiting the very behaviors that we're asking other people to take
Mm-hmm.
on.
Yeah.
Maybe we have to beg forgiveness sometimes
Yeah.
instead of asking for permission. Maybe we have to have the courageous conversations with people in authoritarian positions in the organization to bring about change. So it
Mm-hmm.
is a leadership role. Leaders don't necessarily have direct reports. Sometimes we
Mm-hmm.
tell ourselves these stories about the phrase leader that
Mm-hmm.
just isn't true. Acts of
Yeah.
leadership can happen at any level in an
Yeah.
organization.
Yeah. And talking about coaching, Scrum Masters also are the coaches for the team, right? So what does that look like? What does a coaching scenario looks like for a Scrum Master in the team?
Great question. And I'm going to qualify, Scrum team is
Mm-hmm.
developers, but it's also
Mm-hmm.
product owners. So there's
Yeah.
2/3 of the Scrum Master accountability there. We have the people doing the work, which we just call developers, product
Mm-hmm.
developers, and then the product owner. But then there's
Mm-hmm.
this whole third of the
Mm.
Scrum Master accountability about serving the greater organization. So coaching
Yeah.
the greater organization on the
Mm-hmm.
Scrum team's behalf. And what I always tell Scrum Masters is it's not like, somebody's going to go, I need some coaching, or they might. They might.
Yeah.
So a
Yeah.
lot of the work is going to happen outside of the Scrum events.
Mm-hmm.
There's going to be some work that the Scrum Master has to put in to get to know everybody, because
Mm-hmm.
not every approach is going to necessarily work with
Mm-hmm.
every member of the team of developers.
Yeah.
Likewise, not every approach that they use with the developers is going to work with a product owner or with a leader in the
Mm-hmm.
organization.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of that investment in time is going to happen outside of the Scrum events. Everything from making observations, giving feedback, asking some of those powerful questions to
Mm-hmm.
get people into self-reflection so that
Mm-hmm.
they can improve, so that they can grow.
Yeah. Yeah, Angela, and I'm asking this question on behalf of somebody who's probably, who understands the team Scrum or have gone through some training, but doesn't have experience working in a large, healthcare company or large company where there's a lot of accountability outside of the Scrum team, right? If you could give us some examples of like, what does those engagements or
Mhm.
conversations look like outside of your team with some examples, that would be really cool.
Awesome. And I almost heard you say asking for a friend, right? So there's a couple different stances that we talked about at the beginning of this conversation. We talked about the stance of coaching, but then also neutral facilitation and teaching. So those stances are also
Mm-hmm.
potentially taking place outside of the Scrum team. So let's
Mm-hmm.
say that the product owner has to have a pretty high stakes conversation that really is refinement with
Mm-hmm.
some stakeholders and subject matter experts. They're not ready to
Yeah.
engage the developers just yet. Well, a
Mm-hmm.
Scrum Master can serve that product owner and serve that organization by being available to
Mm.
neutrally facilitate the conversation. It may
Yeah.
go a whole lot more effectively if they do, because the product owner definitely isn't neutral. The product owner,
Mm.
right, is operating from a position of authority about their product.
Yeah.
There may be something that a stakeholder or a leader is doing that's
Mm-hmm.
actually preventing the Scrum team from reaching their goals and objectives, such as pulling somebody off the team, right? Well, I'm
Mm.
just going to borrow Vivek for a special project. Yeah,
Mm.
he's not needed full time on this Scrum team. Well, wait a
Yeah.
minute, that's hurting our ability to get our goals and objectives met. But an
Mm-hmm.
appropriate use of the Scrum Master's time and energy to go have
Mm-hmm.
a conversation with that
Yeah.
person to find out what's really at the root cause. Are there other
Mm-hmm.
alternatives? Do you need to tap the person from the Scrum team away? So
Mm-hmm.
any of those kinds of things would be perfectly within a Scrum Master's wheelhouse in
Yeah.
terms of serving outside the Scrum team.
Yeah. Yeah, Angela, one thing I want to make real for the listeners, when we talked a lot about neutral, right? Like it's a word. So what does not neutral thing that Scrum Masters say or do sound like?
Oh yeah, I got a whole bunch of those.
Yeah.
There's this annoying little phrase that I
Yeah.
hear from some Scrum Masters where they'll say, "I'm taking my Scrum Master hat off right now, and I'm putting my QA hat on to tell
Yeah.
you that you're forgetting about regression testing and you're forgetting." Okay, first of all, there's no hats. Yeah,
Yeah.
just no hats.
That's yeah.
So if a Scrum Master were to phrase things like that, what they're really telling people,
Mm,
I know better than you.
mm,
I'm smarter than
mm,
you when it comes to testing. Wait a minute. You just disempowered your team. You
mm-hmm,
didn't help them. You didn't
mm-hmm,
help them grow. And you definitely weren't neutral if you
mm.
were asserting your own opinion.
Yeah.
There's a Scrum Master who literally said things like that because he did come from a quality assurance background.
Yeah.
My coaching to him, my feedback to him
Yeah.
was, hey, what is bothering you, right? What is going on? And he's like, well, they always forget regression testing. And I said, okay, so
Mm,
instead of making it about you and telling them what they're doing wrong, why don't you invite their participation? Why don't you get
mm,
them to come up with the answer? So why don't you
mm,
try saying, what's that thing that we've forgotten the last
mm.
couple sprints?
Yeah.
Where you don't break something that used to work. And he goes, oh,
Yeah.
then they're just going to come up with the answer that it's regression testing. And I
Right.
said, so if they
Yeah.
come up with the answer, guess what they're likely to do going forward?
Mm,
They're actually likely to remember it. It's not about you,
yeah.
right? We got to get our
Yeah.
ego out of it. So we got to stay
Yeah.
neutral.
Yeah, I love that. So you're saying that, as an active member, coach, facilitator, leader, you're paying attention to what's happening. You're paying attention to what is the company trying to deliver, what's happening in the delivery, what's happening in the team. You have all the data. It's just you're not giving the answer. You're just asking questions so that you're pulling the answers and you're helping the team members see that. But you're doing that by coaching and asking powerful questions.
Absolutely. And there's even, not just at, the developer team level for skill set. There was
Mm-hmm.
a functional manager, right? There was a
Mm-hmm.
manager of the developers at a client I just worked with right before the holidays last year. And every conversation, she would be writing notes for the developers. She would be capturing their technical tasks
Mm-hmm.
coming out of sprint planning. She
Mm-hmm.
would chase down technical things in the organization as a manager. And the Scrum Master couldn't get through to her. So they had me try. And I was
Mm-hmm.
trying to point out, if you're doing all those things, your developers aren't going to grow. And here was her answer. And I had to laugh out loud. She's like, I'm just doing it until they learn how, until they get better at doing it.
Mm-hmm.
What? How do you get better at doing something?
Yeah.
By actually doing it. So
Yes.
here she's literally taking away their
Yeah.
opportunity to grow and to learn with the excuse that she's doing it so they can learn. And I'm like,
Wow. Yeah.
I know, right?
Yeah.
So I think it took just even a neutral who doesn't work there,
Mm-hmm.
playing it back, because to everyone else in that environment, that had just become the way we do things, right? That had just become the status quo.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So sometimes staying neutral, you can pick up on a lot more.
Yeah. Angela, I'm pretty sure you do interview Scrum Master formally or informally, right? So I have this question that I wanted to ask you. Like, how do you assess somebody's conflict mediation skills? How are they about conflict? What kind of questions do they ask? How do you assess that in a potential Scrum Master candidate?
Mm-hmm. The most powerful way is to give a scenario. Because if you were
Mm-hmm.
to say, Vivek, are you okay with conflict? Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
sure I
Yeah.
am. I'm
Yeah.
great during
Yeah.
conflict. How would we
Yeah.
ever know? So
Yeah.
I prefer to paint a mental picture, kind of like the
Mm-hmm.
case studies in the Scrum Master Files. So I'll
Yeah.
literally set up, it's sprint planning. It
Yeah.
is topic 3 of sprint planning, where we're getting into the technical tasks and 2 of your developers just start arguing. And
Mm.
one firmly believes their way is the best way to deliver the solution, and the other person firmly believes theirs is the best. The
Mm,
team is split down the middle and doesn't really know what to say because these two are fighting.
mm,
What do you do?
nice.
Now you're actually going to hear the steps
Yeah.
that they'll go through, and you'll
Yeah.
get so much more information out
Yeah.
of setting up a scenario and letting them respond to it
Yeah.
than, just asking yes or no questions in an interview.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And what do you think is an optimal way for Scrum Master to show up in different conflicts, inside team conflict, outside cross team conflicts? How do you approach and coach to new Scrum Masters?
Well, one of our values in the Scrum framework is respect.
Mm,
So I never underestimate the
mm-hmm,
power of a break.
mm,
And if there's a lot of people involved and there's just one or two, like in the example I just gave, maybe
mm-hmm,
call for a break and just ask the two
mm,
people that are having the conflict or the issue to hang
mm-hmm,
back so we can get to the root cause of what it actually is. Other
mm-hmm,
people will thank you for that
mm-hmm,
because some people don't like being in those
mm,
conversations, even if they're not one of the active participants in the disagreement. They may
yeah.
just be a bystander, but sometimes just you can feel the tension. And
Mm-hmm,
so I'll always err on the side of letting people save face, and not doing it in some sort of public forum. So I'll
mm-hmm.
call for a break, call for a timeout, and then reconvene and start attacking it based on what the root cause is once I find out, what's really at the heart of the issue.
Nice. Thank you. Um, so Scrum Master, like how do Scrum Master identify coachable and teachable moments? How do they do that?
I know it's such an art. It's
Yeah.
it's kind of part skill and part art, because I always tell new scrum masters it's not like developers are going to go, we have an impediment, although they might, right? They,
Yeah.
they might be
Yeah.
like, oh, my machine is down today or whatever. Those are the easy ones. The ones
Mm,
that aren't easy are where you have to listen for
mm,
where people are literally talking past each other, or you
mm,
can tell somebody is so confused but they
mm,
are not asking questions. So
yeah.
wouldn't it be helpful for a neutral to say,
Mm-hmm,
can we just go around the room and
mm-hmm,
ask the question that you still need addressed, or ask a clarifying question, however big or small? Now you just took the pressure off. You made it
mm-hmm.
okay to let
Yeah.
people do that, because it's less about knowing all the details about it and
Mm-hmm,
more about making sure they understand. So it's going to take being there. It's going to
mm-hmm.
take practice, and it's going to take a lot of kind of that art, that nuance, as opposed to one specific thing every single time. And people are going to be different too. All the
Yeah.
different people on the Scrum team, you might have to vary your approach a little bit depending on who's talking or who is involved.
100%. Yeah. So Angela, last question for this episode. What do people not understand about Scrum Master role from like the hiring the team perspective, the hiring team perspective, and also from somebody who's trying to go into the Scrum Master role?
It is not a secretary. The Scrum Master, if done effectively, is
Mm-hmm,
not about keeping notes, keeping artifacts, and being the
mm-hmm,
scribe for the team.
mm-hmm,
And I feel like I fell into that trap because I did
mm-hmm,
come from IT project management when I was first in the Scrum Master
mm-hmm,
role when I was
mm-hmm,
newer. And I still see that today. I still hear from Scrum Masters that say they expect me to take the notes. No, because then they're not learning. I
yeah,
have this little phrase I use in the book, and recently on social media, somebody let me know they didn't care for the phrase. But my
yeah,
phrase is, get your hands off the
yeah,
team's work.
yes,
And it's just a catchy little way to kind of
yeah,
remind yourself, wait a minute. Because if you're doing what they're supposed to be doing, you're kind of missing those teachable, coachable moments you talked about. And it's
yeah,
really not about that. And
yeah,
so they took that phrase too literally, because they're like, what if the Scrum Master could help by making some coffee? And I'm like, hey, I'm all for that, right? I mean, I'm all for however they can add value. I'm talking about not falling into the trap of being their note taker. And so
yeah,
many job
yeah,
descriptions right now, or so many people really think it's some kind of a project management role, and it's totally
mm,
different.
yeah. Beautiful. Thank you so much, Angela. I learned a lot. I'm really excited to read your book. And we'll definitely do a second episode, just doing deep dive into some of the case studies. I really appreciate this. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
All right, that's a wrap with this episode. Thank you for listening till the end. We hope these podcasts are providing value on your Agile journey. If you haven't visited our website, theagilecoach.com, we highly suggest you for other courses and supporting material on your journey. You can also get access to our self-paced courses or learn more about the live training that we provide to become a Scrum Master, Product Owner, Product Manager. With that, we will see you on the next episode. Love and best wishes from the Agile Coach.